Waiters of Reddit, what messed up thing have you overheard while waiting tables? Well, I was a manager at a restaurant for a few years not too long ago. There was this woman who came in from time to time, always with two boys around 13 or 14 years old. She wasn't unattractive exactly, but there was something about the way she looked at me that, even as a man, made me uncomfortable. I was sitting with a couple of regulars at the bar, and she and the two boys were at the table behind me, my back to hers. One of the boys got up to go to the bathroom. I assumed they were both her sons, but after the boy left, I overheard this exchange. Woman, we've got to be more careful. He almost walked in on us this morning. Boy, I know, I'm sorry. Woman, we can talk about it tonight after he falls asleep. Shh, here he comes. Anyway, at the time, I assumed they were planning a party or something. My mind definitely did not go to a darker place. It turns out, it should have. She was a teacher at a local school, and the boy she was speaking to was a friend of her son's. They knew each other from church. The boy eventually confided in a church elder. Investigations revealed that she had been engaging with him repeatedly, over 40 times. The community was shocked when this became public. She was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 6 years in prison. Story 2. A party of 5 or 6, just a group of friends having dinner. In walks a clown. The clown starts wandering around the restaurant, making balloon animals for kids and all that. I had no idea what was going on. We didn't hire this guy. He walks over to the table of 5 or 6 and picks a man from the table to perform a magic trick. There's a small flash of smoke and fire, and suddenly there's an engagement ring on a rope. The man takes the ring, and the woman gets down on her knees and asks him to marry her. The man says no, tells her to get up, and they continue their dinner. The table now has the attention of the entire restaurant, about 300 to 400 people on our busiest night. Everyone just turned away and awkwardly continued eating like nothing had happened. Story 3. I'm a shucker at an oyster bar. Aside from all the obvious terrible jokes I get, I can say without a doubt the most messed up thing I've ever heard was a man sitting with a woman who was getting more and more distraught. He looked at her and said, "Look, I told you from the start. If I had to choose between you and my wife, I'm picking my wife." Story 4. I saw a mother take her knife and, using the flat side, smack the hand of her 2-year-old child because the child was drawing with her left hand. She yelled, "No, use your right hand. Good girls don't write with their left hand." This happened while I was standing there taking their order, writing with my left hand. Story 5. I was at the bar, not waiting tables, but I have 2 stories. The first involved a couple who sat directly in front of where I was washing glasses. This was during the NBA Finals, so it was odd that they seemed so sad while everyone else was enjoying the game. They spent at least 4 hours there, and from what I could hear, they were discussing having another child to fix their relationship. Apparently, she had cheated on him because she felt empty, but didn't want to end their relationship since they already had children together. The man was clearly very upset, but said he would support her if that was what she wanted. The second happened last week during a large fundraiser we hosted. A group of 3 or 4 women seemed noticeably uncomfortable. When I asked if they were okay, they said one of them had a stalker who constantly showed up at her house, work, and called her repeatedly. He had just shown up at the bar. She had threatened to call the police if he didn't leave her alone, and what did he do? Naturally, he bought her a drink as an apology. Story 6. A good-looking family, 2 parents and a child, walked into the vegetarian restaurant where I volunteered. These restaurants in my country are often run by pagodas and monks, usually for charity, though sometimes they profit from devout Buddhists who come to cleanse their souls by paying big money and eating vegetarian food. The parents were devout Buddhists, so they chose to be vegetarian, but the child was forced to eat vegetarian food. I could see the pain on his face as he was made to eat tofu. As you might guess, he refused. The father then slapped the child so hard that 50 people in the room could hear the kid's teeth hit his mouth. The child fell to the floor before the mother grabbed him by the ear and forced him to apologize to the Buddha for disrespecting him. The father said, "You little brat better respect the Buddha or you'll eat from the floor again tonight." Yes, some people really think that beating a child and forcing them to eat scraps off the floor is acceptable, but not becoming a vegetarian is a sin. Story 7. I waited tables at the Olive Garden 10 years ago. Not really messed up, more funny. A man and his wife sat down and immediately started arguing. Something about his affair and a baby from it costing them money. It all came to a head as I brought out their salad. As I walked away, I heard the wife say, Well, maybe if you hadn't slept with our son's girlfriend and gotten her pregnant, we could afford to eat somewhere nicer than the Olive Garden. Oh, look, the highlight of my meals. Unlimited bagged salad. Maybe you could save up and we could go to Joe's Crab Shack for our anniversary. A-hole. Story 8. The family of a friend owned a diner in one of the suburbs of our state's capital city. I was short on money and was offered a few shifts, weekends and evenings, so my friend's mom could take a little vacation. One slow, rainy Friday night, 2 men walked in and sat at the bar. One was the owner of a local construction business, well, known in the region for sponsoring youth and community events and being politically active. While I was in the kitchen preparing their orders, I could overhear their conversation about various projects. At one point, the second man asked how a meeting with name of a very prominent political figure had gone, commenting on how difficult that person was. The construction owner replied, "Don't worry about him. Right now he's having the time of his life at the club. Our treat, of course. And tomorrow, we'll have a video of it." The club referred to a building at the edge of the suburb that officially was a dancing bar, but everyone knew it was really a place for S-workers. Essentially, the construction owner admitted to A, paying for a politician's VIP visit the club, and B, obtaining material to potentially blackmail that politician. I was pretty nervous hearing all of this. I was fairly sure they thought I couldn't hear them, but I wanted to make sure there was no doubt. I had my iPod with me, so I put in my in-ear headphones. Then I used my cell phone to dial the diner's number, and when it rang, I just ignored it. After a minute or so, one of the men shouted, "Hey, telephone!" I came running, headphones dangling down my shirt, and said, "Sorry, I didn't hear it back there. Please, don't tell the boss." I was really nervous, feeling my face go red, fearing they might see through my act, but they just saw a teenager worried about customers complaining. The construction guy smiled and said, "Don't worry, we were young once too." They changed the topic to sports, finished their food, and left. They even left a nice big tip. I haven't felt that nervous again until 20 years later when I asked my wife to marry me. Story 9. We had a couple who came in regularly and always asked to be seated in my co-workers section. They were probably in their 60s and were always really affectionate and cute with each other. My co-worker would joke around with them all the time. One day, the man came in with a different woman than usual, and my coworker jokingly said, "Oh, you're in trouble. I'm going to tell your wife you were here with another woman." The woman said, "Excuse me, I am his wife." "Who the heck has he been coming here with?" Dead awkward silence as she death glares at her extremely uncomfortable looking husband. My coworker just turned around and walked away. Story 10. I work the bar at a pub, restaurant, and function hall directly across from the only hotel in my smallish city. The hotel is fairly large and houses an interesting mix of displaced locals, people on business in the area, and always a few S-workers. Needless to say, I've seen, heard, and been told some really messed up things by passing strangers. But the one thing that sticks in my mind was a local groom-to-be who came in with some of his groomsmen the night before his wedding. These guys were staying at the hotel the night before, and the groom was pounding drink after drink, complaining to me about how he couldn't believe he was getting married and that he didn't even love this woman. After a long night of drinking and wallowing in his pre-wedding jitters, one of the local working girls came down for a drink. The groom started talking to her and eventually took her back to the hotel room. As the bartender, I try not to pass too much judgment, but it was pretty horrifying to realize this guy was with an S-worker the night before his wedding. It gets worse. The next night, I came into work, and there was a function upstairs, the wedding reception for the same happy couple, which is when I discovered that the drunken groom had just married the daughter of one of our local distributors, a man I've known for years, who regularly drinks at my bar. I've never felt so much pity for a stranger as I did in that moment. Story 11. So much cheating. Last week, a guy came in at 10:45, 15 minutes before we closed. He sat on our heated patio and said he was waiting for someone. He seemed a little arrogant and immediately played with his Bentley key fob as I approached the table, probably to show off. About 10 minutes later, only minutes before our kitchen closed, a 10 out of 10 woman walked up to the table and asked what our most expensive bottle of Pinot Noir was. They ordered food, enjoyed a second bottle of wine, and began arguing about something. It was now 11:40. We had been closed for a while, and I just wanted them to leave. I walked up to check on them, and she started yelling at him, saying he treated his wife better than he treated her. He immediately pulled out his phone and said, "Buy yourself a necklace online. Whatever you want, no matter the price." She settled down, ordered something that would financially cripple someone like me, and asked for our dessert menu. I told her the kitchen had closed an hour ago and that we were essentially the only people left in the restaurant. The guy then waved his black card around, silently telling me to bring the bill. They ran up a $320 tab and left me a minimal tip. He left his phone on the table, so I ran out to the parking lot after his car and handed it back. In return, he humbled himself enough to give me a business card and said, "Pass this to anyone who needs law counsel," before speeding away. The whole experience? A solid 2 out of 7. Story 12. I used to wait tables at a restaurant on a golf course, and a group of businessmen would always come in to drink beer after their rounds. They ranged in age from 30 to 50. There was always an elaborate song and dance about who would pay for the beers, but it usually ended up being the guy who looked like the alpha of the group. He had a nicer watch and better clubs than the others. This went on for months. One day, one of the members who had never paid for a round ended up on the hook. He insisted, "No, I should pay." But the others finally let him. He gulped, looked worried, and tried every card he had, but all were declined. He ran off to call his bank, and I heard the alpha mutter, "I should have made her get the abortion." Edit. To clarify, I long thought the alpha was the other guy's father, but someone in the comments suggested it's more plausible that he was his father-in-law and had tried to get his daughter to abort the child of this man. Story 13. It was a slow Tuesday night behind the bar. I had a guest come in whom I had tended to a few times before. He seemed like a really nice guy, tipped well, drank well, and ate well. On this particular night, a woman came and sat down next to him. They seemed to know each other pretty well, so I assumed they were work buddies because I knew he didn't have a girlfriend. Honestly, I thought he was gay. An hour or so went by. They had 2 bottles of really nice wine, ordered almost everything off the menu, and everyone was having a great time. Then, my hostess came around the corner of the bar and motioned for me to come talk to her. "There's a man on the phone who is extremely upset and needs the bartender to answer," she said. I picked up the phone, having no idea what this man wanted. "Hello, sir. Thank you for holding. What can I help you with?" The man started with a question. "Is there a man with dark short hair, brown eyes, a bit on the bigger side, sitting next to a short blonde woman with blue eyes at your bar?" I turned around to get another look and replied, "Yes, they've been here for a while. What's up?" There was a pause. Then, in a very unhappy tone, he said, "That's my wife and my brother." Just as he said it, I looked back at the couple and saw the end of a kiss. I felt awful, seeing this man's life literally crumble. I told him I wasn't sure what he should do, but suggested he call his wife. After that, the man at my bar asked for his check, tipped well, and the 2 of them left. I haven't seen them since. Story 14. I have 2. A couple in their mid-50s, along with the man's son, around 18, came into my restaurant. This wasn't a fancy place, more like a Boston pizza-style chain. The man got down on one knee to propose, and his son immediately started losing it. He kept yelling that he couldn't let him marry her and how terrible she was. Thankfully, it was later in the afternoon, so the restaurant was mostly empty, but all of us servers were standing nearby, getting quite the show. The second was a table I was personally serving. A couple came in with their 2 children and the children's uncle. They took 2 booths side by side, one for the parents and one for the uncle and kids. I thought it was odd that they weren't sitting together, but the wife explained they were getting a divorce and were there to discuss the details. The husband was clearly distressed and cried throughout the meal while the wife yelled at him to keep it together. The worst part was that their kids were very young, around 5 and 7. Why anyone would want them to witness that, and in a restaurant of all places, is beyond me. It was the most uncomfortable table I've ever served. Story 15. I waited tables for 10 years at a small family-owned restaurant in rural Ohio that had a famous sandwich. It had been featured on a few Food Network shows and stuff like that. A family comes in, mom, dad, and 2 little kids. I take their drink orders, and as I'm getting the drinks, the dad pulls me aside. "Dad, my son is obsessed with Billy Bob Thornton. We told him that Billy Bob comes here from time to time, so could you just play along?" Me: "Yeah, of course, no problem." I return with the drinks, and the son, who is about 5 years old, starts asking me questions about Billy Bob Thornton, like what he orders, if he is nice, and stuff like that. I make things up because I want a good tip and don't want to ruin this little kid's excitement. He is so thrilled to hear that Billy Bob comes to the same place he is at. I can only imagine the other scenarios where Billy Bob Thornton has appeared in this kid's life. Story 16. I overheard a customer talking about someone coming and being so much fun. I assumed she was pregnant because she seemed to be showing a bit. Midway through the dinner, I decided to congratulate her. To my horror, she said, "I am not pregnant." I felt awful. I told my manager who comped their meals, and I hid in the back for the rest of their dinner. In the end, she refused to let the manager comp her meal and left me a $20 tip with a note that said, "I was kidding. I'm due in July." Story 17. Not really messed up, but by far the best conversation I ever overheard was at a table of 3, a Russian woman and 2 gay men. They were seated closest to the serving station, so I could hear everything while taking care of my other tables. One of the men was introducing his fiancée to his ex-wife, who he had mail-ordered. Apparently, he realized during this first serious relationship with a woman that he was gay. They parted amicably after she was awarded citizenship. He began dating men, and she started a career. More of a what-the-heck moment than a messed-up one. Story 18. I worked at a restaurant where you paid at the table, and if you wanted a receipt, the server would print it and bring it to you. I was waiting on a woman whom every other server refused to deal with because she was such a hassle. She came in all the time, complained about everything, and basically made up her own menu items. At the end of the meal, when she was paying, I asked if she needed a receipt. She said yes. She wanted proof she was there at that time in case she was accused of murder that night. Probably not the weirdest thing, but it's the first one that comes to mind. Story 19. 15 years in restaurant work here. There's a reason I'm no longer doing it. 1. I once had a middle-aged man tell me it was obvious my mother didn't love me when I was born, just by looking at my name tag. His elderly mother looked at me and laughed. My name isn't common, but it's not offensive. When I dropped off their food, I just set it down and said, "Don't choke on it." 2. I waited on a total Guido who acted like he was in the mafia. He had some ditzy arm candy with him and made me tell her he was the most important guy there. I played along. Why not? She ate it up and thought he was Tony Montana. 3. While managing a sports bar, a man puffed up and got in my face because he refused to pay the outrageous bill presented to him and his 10 buddies. He was so drunk he forgot he had already paid. This guy was a badass lawyer and insisted he would sue for something. He also kept telling me I wasn't the real manager and demanded to speak to the person in charge. I was the only manager there. I pulled the bartender aside to check the bill. She confirmed they had ordered almost an entire bottle of Jaeger and shots, plus many pints. Things got ugly, and the cops were called. When they arrived, Mr. Badass literally ducked and snuck out the door. One of my employees pointed this out to the cops. They went outside to speak to him, and in the end, the cops said Mr. Badass had effectively decided to go to jail. 4. Same sports bar, homecoming weekend in a college town. A man walked in with 6 or 7 family members 5 minutes before kickoff and demanded a table. Now, this was a top 25 ranked Big 12 school, and we had people lined up outside the door when we opened 2 hours earlier. This guy claimed he was a doctor and insisted we give him a table. We told him all tables were full and he could wait to see if one opened up. He loudly demanded that we make someone get up so his family could sit. People were now watching the spectacle and had forgotten about the game. He eventually left after speaking to our managers and district manager, who was there because he knew how busy it would be. Dr. Dushekanu was so mad, he filed a corporate complaint. The owner called us, heard the story, and just laughed. 5. At the same sports bar, I had to jump in the kitchen one day to help out because we got slammed. I made a nacho appetizer that looked like it came straight off a menu picture. Perfect. Even the cooks and servers said I was setting the bar too high. About 20 minutes later, the server who ordered them came back with an empty plate and said, "Here is the nacho plate that you made." I was proud, thinking the table had practically licked it clean. Then she added, "He wants a refund because he didn't like them." A single man had eaten about 3.5 pounds of nachos down to the last crumb and decided it wasn't good enough to pay for. He did not get a refund. 6. I waited on a lot of famous people, and most of them were really cool. The absolute worst to wait on are the Joe Six-packs of the world who have insecurity issues. The only autograph I ever asked for was Jenny Finch because she and her then fiancé came in on a slow weekday afternoon and we had a good conversation. 7. I waited on a girl who was attractive, but obviously a lady of the night. She had 10 pounds of boob in a 5-pound bra. She was actually pretty cool and seemed normal. She told me a story about being with an NBA player visiting town, common since we were about 2 blocks from an NBA arena. She said nothing seemed odd until he dropped his pants, and she laughed because there was nothing she could do except a very expensive handy. Apparently he was large, and she described it as basically a $600 arm workout. 8. One night early in my customer service career, we were slammed and I was working in the kitchen. We were sweating like we were in a sauna and the tickets kept coming in. The bartender decided it was the perfect time to come back to the window and tell us how to do our jobs because she didn't think the hoagies should be cut diagonally. I lost it. I remember saying, "Get back behind the fucking bar where you belong." 30 seconds later, a drunk lady who frequented the place was in the kitchen, yelling at me about how I should shut my mouth and do my job. Apparently, the bartender had gone to her with her tale of woe, claiming I was being very rude. I told the owner the next night, and he said he would have thrown hot refried beans at her to get her out of the kitchen. 9. At one place, we had just hired a new assistant manager who was odd. One busy night, I went back to the prep area and he was on his cell phone. Nothing unusual until he suddenly turned his head, threw up on the floor, and went back to his conversation. He stopped coming to work shortly after, and some money went missing. 10. At the same restaurant, we had a young 23-year-old female manager with a drinking problem, to the point that her mother collected her paychecks. There were many days when the kitchen staff would call me because they were locked out. She hadn't shown up to let them in. I ended up managing one day in a pair of gym shorts and a t-shirt because they had gotten me out of bed after closing the night before. She came in 3 hours late as if it were no big deal. The kicker: she and I both applied to manage at another place when they were hiring one manager. They hired her, and she made sure I heard about it every time we saw each other. That other place closed within 6 months. Story 20. In college, I worked at a mediocre place as a bartender and waiter when I was 21 or 22. One dinner time, a couple walked in and was seated in my section. They were maybe in their mid to late 30s and married. When I approached, I could tell they were arguing. She was quiet and distant. He was red in the face. I kept my spiel about the specials short, took their drink order, and returned a bit later for their dinner order. They were arguing again, but quieted as I approached. He ordered for them both tersely, and I started to walk away when he said, "Hey, question for you." I turned back. "Yes, sir. Would you bang my wife?" I froze, shocked and confused, and looked at her. She was staring daggers at him. I fumbled for a moment, not sure if I'd heard right or what to say. He clarified, "I don't mean will you, I mean would you? Is she attractive? Do you find her attractive?" Red in the face and sweating, I glanced at her and mumbled, "Yes, sir. She's very attractive." He held his hands up like, "There, you see?" She looked at me and hissed, "He's in his 20s. He'd do a hole in the wall. You can leave now." She flapped a hand at me. I scurried away. My shirt was sticking to me. I didn't say another word except to ask if they wanted refills on their drinks. They left a normal tip. To this day, I still think about it. Story 21. I had a regular who came in almost weekly and ordered the same thing every visit, except he would alternate between his wife and kids and his girlfriends. We started noticing when he would sit on the same side and make out with different women on different nights. I mean, it was hard to miss. You start keeping your head down and giving that look of disapproval when you lock eyes, but it's none of your business. And he tipped very well, probably hush money. Eventually, after a few months, his wife caught on and stormed into the restaurant, straight to the table where the husband and his girlfriend were sitting, like she was hiding backstage on the set of Maury. He apologized and swore it would never happen again. It didn't, for a while. But after 2 months, he had a new girlfriend and was pulling the same stunt. You'd think he would find a new restaurant, but the man loves his shrimp. Story 22. Not so much something I heard, but something I saw. A man was eating with the mother of his child in one section of the restaurant. Unbeknownst to him, his girlfriend at the time was a few tables away eating with a friend. The girlfriend suddenly jumped over a table in a walled-off section of the restaurant to attack the child's mother. A scuffle broke out. Hair pieces went flying, and at one point, the mother dropped the baby carriage, with the baby inside, from about waist height. I grabbed the carrier and retreated into the crowd as people rushed in to break up the fight. The girlfriend spit at the mother and missed, nearly hitting a couple seated behind them. The mother spun around and demanded her baby back. I reluctantly handed the child over, knowing there was little I could do. They fled the restaurant once the cops were called, and on the way out, the mother picked up a brick and smashed the window of what she thought was the girlfriend's car, only to find out it belonged to someone else. Story 23. To this day, I feel awful having witnessed this. A couple of years ago, I was working nights at a Greasy Spoon diner, used to dealing with really drunk people coming in all night. I rarely saw children, and when I did, something often felt off. One Saturday night, a woman dragged her 4-year-old daughter into the restaurant and ordered her a kid's meal. The girl refused to eat and started fussing. After a minute, the mother began cursing and dragged the girl by her arm into the bathroom, presumably to teach her a lesson. They returned a minute later, and the child silently picked at her food. At the same time, a drunk couple came in, laughing and kissing. The angry mother spotted them and started screaming vulgarities at the man. He responded, "Oh, hell no. Who the heck do you think you are bringing her here with your drunk ass at 3 a.m.? He went to get his daughter, who screamed, "Daddy," and wrapped her arms around his neck. He asked me to call a cab, which I did. No sooner had the mother started making a scene, trying to grab her child, than a very physical fight broke out between her and the girlfriend when she couldn't get the kid away. I called the police, which caused the mother to flee. The cops stayed with the father and girlfriend until the cab arrived. I hope he's been a good dad. Story 24. I bust tables, so I hear a lot of conversations. The most screwed up was probably between two teenage girls. Girl 1, "What happened between you and Kyle? Like, why'd you guys break up?" Girl 2, "He started drifting away from me. Wouldn't talk to me. Jason and I talked more in the past 2 days than me and Kyle for like 2 weeks. I get that your mom died like a month ago, but you can't just ignore me, you know? He really needed to get over it if he wanted to save our relationship." Girl 1, "When did his mom die? Like the day?" Girl 2, "I don't know. Let me check." Pulls out her phone and scrolls through what I assume were her messages. I'm also cleaning slower to hear the rest. Girl 2, January 27th. I guess a little less than a month. Whatever. Talking is like the most essential part of a relationship. And if you're not going to do it, then shrugs. I leave at that point and do the math. That day was February 18th. So a little over 3 weeks since the guy's mom died. Pretty heartless. Story 25. Just last night, I was in the bathroom when 2 women were talking. I wasn't really paying attention until one of them started crying, saying she didn't know if she was going to survive 2017. I wasn't sure if she meant it literally or figuratively, but they obviously didn't know I was there. I just sat there thinking, crap, I've got to get back to my table soon. A year or so ago, we had a server from Brazil working with us. He was an American citizen and very nice, extremely good at his job. He had a host of regulars within months of starting. He spoke good English, though with a fairly heavy accent. One night, we were in a shared section together. I was sweeping near a table he was taking care of, an older all-white group. He walked away after asking about something, and I heard one of the women exclaim about Muslims. The table then erupted into a storm of xenophobic rhetoric. I told my manager, who seemed upset but couldn't do much, until the server returned, and the table requested a different server because they didn't want to be waited on by an immigrant Muslim. My manager assigned a new server, and later informed the table that they would not be welcomed back. Besides the racist nonsense, they were completely wrong. He's not even Muslim. He's probably more Christian than they are. Edit. Another good one. This was my first night on the floor at the restaurant I currently work at. The dinner rush had subsided, and I was helping a coworker bus one of her tables. It was one of those corner booths where the seat kind of wraps around the table. I was about to crawl over the seat to reach something when I noticed little splotches of blood. Not just splotches. Tiny, cloven-hooved stamps of period blood where the woman had lifted herself and slid across the seat several times. Gross. Eat it too. Man, I keep thinking of good ones. This restaurant has heavy metal salad plates and heavy glass cylinders for holding candles. I once witnessed a two-top of women throw both at each other. I was walking by just as it broke out. Let me emphasize, the restaurant was packed. It turns out one of the women sneezed on her friend's salad, and her friend had a meltdown. Or at least, that was the explanation one of them gave later when she came back to apologize. Story 26. My experience happened a while back when I was waiting tables at a now-defunct Irish-themed chain restaurant. I was given a two-top on an average Wednesday night, just a guy and his kid. I walked up and gave my standard greeting. "Hi, I'm Jay. I'll be your waiter this evening. Is there anything?" The guy cut me off. "I'm gonna stop you right there. First, answer me a question. Which of your meats is softest?" I was a little taken aback, but I recovered quickly. I responded, "Well, we have a Guinness burger, which is pretty soft, and we just got an Irish pot roast on the menu this week that's also on the softer side." After pondering for a few seconds, he said, "The pot roast sounds great. We'll take 2 of those and a couple glasses of water." I walked away, got him his water, and put the order in. I was still thinking about the oddness of his question when I realized I had to urinate. I headed to the bathroom, and as I was at the urinal, who comes in but the soft meat guy? Of course, he chose the urinal right next to me, even though there were plenty of others. He turned to me mid-pee and said, "So, what's in the pot roast?" I was absolutely stunned. Was this guy serious? Both of our dongs were out, and he was asking about pot roast ingredients. I did what any sensible person would do and listed them. Well, let's see. Peas, carrots, potatoes, and beef, all slow-cooked in Guinness beer, served with a side of sourdough bread. "Wonderful," he said. "I can't wait to try it." He finished up, washed his hands, and left. I was so shocked by the encounter that I hadn't even realized I'd finished peeing. After washing my hands, I told the waitstaff about it. And from that day forward, whenever someone had to use the bathroom, it was called making pot roast. Story 27. It was 1997 or 1998. At a horrible chain Italian restaurant in a city whose most famous native son is a fictional meth cook. A family sat down in my section. One of the kids was wearing a pageant costume and an absurd amount of makeup. She looked to be about 7 years old. Even without overhearing any conversation, it was legitimately creepy. But buckle up, because it got worse. I dropped off the carb bombs at the table and noticed the little girl's kid cup of chocolate milk was almost empty. I asked the parents if they wanted a refill, offering 2% whole or water. Careful not to say chocolate milk, since most parents don't want their kids having more than one. They asked for water, so I brought a fresh cup. As I approached the table, I heard unhappy child noises. Then an adult said, JonBenet always took at least one bite of her dinner. For context, the JonBenet Ramsey case had been a huge deal in New Mexico. It was just up the road, and it hadn't even been a year or so before. It was scary for parents, not something they joked about. Surely I had misheard or was projecting, because honestly, when I first saw them walk in, I thought, who the heck still does that JonBenet nonsense anymore? I gave the little beauty queen her water, and she lost her mind. I want chocolate milk. She swatted at the cup and knocked it over. I picked it up and started cleaning the mess. Her mom said, clear as day, Bree Hannah, what happened to JonBenet when she knocked over her drink? Now, I've let a lot slide while waiting tables. If I'm not actively tuning out conversations, I'm certainly acting as if I am. But this, friends, this would not stand. After a long pause, I asked the mom, I'm dying to know, what had happened when JonBenet knocked over her drink? Silence. Oh no, you're not implying silence. I often wonder what happened to that kid. Story 28. I was a server at a family-owned Italian place in the suburbs. A couple in their 40s came in and quickly got utterly wasted on martinis, bickering loudly. They were in the section next to mine, so I didn't interact with them directly, but I could see things getting ugly. Eventually, they took it outside. Suddenly, a cop came in and announced that the restaurant was temporarily locked down. No one could enter or leave. It turned out the fighting couple both had loaded guns on them and had pulled them out, waving them at each other in the parking lot. Story 29. This one's a little different. It wasn't overheard from a customer, but from my manager that night. It was my last night working at probably the worst restaurant in town. To most people in our small town, it seemed decent compared to other options, but behind the scenes, it was pretty gross. Constantly cold or undercooked food, bad hygiene and practices by some kitchen staff, machines that hadn't been cleaned in who knows how long, you get the idea. So it's my last night. I'm already there later than I should be, but that's restaurant life. I'm the pre-closer, and I'm working with my least favorite manager. I have plenty of stories about her unprofessionalism and fights with other coworkers, but I'll save those for another time. As the pre-closer, I'm in charge of the bathrooms if we don't have a host. That night, we did have a host, but she left without finishing her side work, and manager let her go without checking. I went into the bathroom on my break and noticed it hadn't been cleaned. I mentioned it to my manager, and she told me it was my job now. Trying to get out of there as fast as possible, I asked one of my coworkers, the closer, if she would handle the bathrooms instead, and I'd clean and stock the salad bar. She agrees, but my manager overhears and says this is totally against the rules. I have to clean the bathroom myself. Okay, fine, just get me out of here. I go into the men's bathroom and see a huge pile of vomit behind the trash can and smeared on the wall. Someone clearly aimed and missed, then tried to hide it by moving the trash can in front. It's old, drying, and looks like cement. I come out and tell my manager and the bartender, hey, someone threw up in the bathroom and it looks pretty old. My bartender looks shocked, but my manager just tells me what soap to use in the back and to hurry because I'm still on the clock. As I walk away, I hear my bartender say she hasn't seen someone drunk enough to throw up in hours. My manager replies, oh yeah, that happened around 10 this morning. Someone reported it, but I wasn't about to clean it up, so I left it for the host. That puke had been sitting there for over 12 hours. It was past 10 p.m., and she had done absolutely nothing about it. In hindsight, I should have just taken off my apron, clocked out, and left. Story 30. Not so much overhearing messed up stuff, but two extremely messed up incidents come to mind. The first was very sad. While serving at a relatively upscale place, a man made a reservation for a table for two. He arrived alone, and when I approached, he told me it was his first anniversary with his girlfriend, and he wanted everything to be perfect. He ordered what he said was her favorite drink and an appetizer to have waiting for her when she arrived. Time passed. He made a phone call. The appetizer was getting cold, the drink getting warm. After about half an hour, the woman arrived and sat down. His face lit up with joy at first, but within 5 minutes, I watched the joy drain from his face and be replaced by the most heartbreaking expression I have ever seen. Then she left, and he sat there crying for a while. Every nearby table went silent, caught in the socially awkward force field of his sobbing. He eventually paid for the appetizer and drinks and left, looking utterly defeated. The second incident was at a big Italian dining chain. I won't say which one, but it's the kind of place where your family serving terrible pseudo-Italian food. At this chain, tables of 7 or more guests were supposed to be served by 2 servers. 2 large parties arrived at the same time, and I took them with my serving partner. She was normally great, but that night she was having an off day. I wasn't on my A game either, and I probably could have prevented the catastrophe if I had been. So, party number 1 pulled us aside and explained they were giving their daughter a car for her birthday and had baked the key into the cake for her to find. We took their cake to the back to be presented at the end of the meal. Party number 2 was also a family birthday for an older woman. By coincidence, they brought their own cake as well, but without a car key baked into it. Seriously, who does that? You can probably see where this is going. I had these 2 large parties plus a 5-top of my own. Everything went fairly smoothly, and the 2 birthday parties were finishing around the same time. I told my partner I needed to check on my 5-top before dessert for the birthdays. She decided to get a jump on things, and of course, brought the wrong cake over to Grandma's birthday party. She gave them the cake with appetizer plates for slices and wasn't at the table long enough to hear them wonder why it was different. Then she brought the other wrong cake to the daughter's birthday party just as I was returning from my table and realizing the disaster. In the end, Grandma thought her family was giving her a car, while her family sat there completely bewildered and unsure how to handle it. The father of the girl who was actually supposed to get the car angrily snatched the keys from the elderly woman's hands as she cried, and both families grew increasingly frustrated with us. I did my best to smooth things over. The manager ended up comping both big parties. My coworker narrowly avoided getting fired, and I had a few extra drinks that evening. Story 31. I was serving in the lounge on a busy night. I had a party of 8 finishing their meals when a table of 2, a middle-aged man and woman, arrived. I went to take their drink order, and the man was visibly agitated. I asked if something was wrong and if I could help. He said, "Get me out of here before I murder someone." I told him I'd check with the host stand to find a table in the dining room as quickly as possible. On my way there, one of the men from my party of 8 ran out of the lounge on his cell phone talking to the cops. My brother just threatened to kill me. It turned out the man from the 2-top and one of the men from my party of 8 were brothers with some seriously bad blood. The angry guy from the 2-top ran after his brother into the parking lot, grabbed a bat from his truck, and started swinging. The other brother peeled out in his own truck before he got hit. This happened about a year and a half ago, and I was just served a subpoena to testify in court as a witness for that lovely incident. Story 32. I was technically a busser, so sue me. A bit of context about the restaurant. We were an extremely popular upscale seafood joint in a tourist town. Our primary customers were upper middle to lower upper class, coming in for a high-end meal. We had an auto gratuity on parties of 8 or more. This is important. One evening, a large number of groups arrived all at once, without reservations, and each asked to be seated upstairs. Once they were all settled, everyone was talking to each other. But whenever the waitresses came by, each group of 5 made sure to separate and be clear they were on their own. I think we all know where this is going. The conglomerate of about 16 to 18 people was decked out in pastel colors, boat shoes, expensive leather purses, the works. They went through a few bottles of wine per table and ordered food like it was a buffet. Around the waitresses, they were saccharine sweet, perfectly lovely people. But not around the busboy. Maybe they thought I was deaf or busy. Here are a few favorites. Jesus Christ, did you see the ass on that one? What a pig, in reference to a waitress. I couldn't believe that little shit at the docks. Why the hell did they need to wait to moor the boat? Don't they know we bring all that damn money into this podunk town? I really like it up here, the northern US, and there's a lot less Mexicans. I guess, but remember that Chinese place? Bo Ching Chong blah blah blah. I couldn't understand the waitress at all. Jesus, that cashier at the loft, what a retard. It went on like this for a good chunk of the night while their kids ran around. I made sure to let the on-duty manager know, and she was already keeping an eye on them. Sadly, the owner had a strict customer service first policy, and other than ensuring no other patrons were seated upstairs, we couldn't do much. When the checks came, because they were officially in small groups of 5, there was no auto gratuity. They neglected to leave a tip on a combined bill of about $700. People suck. Story 33. Oh geez. I was working a lunch shift one afternoon, prepping for a large kid party coming in within the next 15 minutes. An old, decrepit white gentleman who could barely walk came limping in with a young, dark, voluptuous girl. She seemed nervous following him in. Or maybe it was the high heels she could barely walk in. Anyway, this man ordered a slice with his lady, and they started talking. I was sitting aside, minding my own business, when I began to hear comments like, "I like to keep my ladies near my job so that my wife does not find out. I tell her I am at work and then come, get a hotel, and we can have a ball. I may look like an old kook, but I will toss your buns around a room. I can handle my own. Little girls like yourself do not know what is coming for you." I was shocked to hear this barely able to walk old man speak to this girl like that. And I say girl because she seemed fairly young. Her demeanor was not one of someone who had done this before. He kept going on loudly about the vile things he wanted to do to her. He was not shy about profanity, and his age made it hard for him to recognize how loud he was in our small dining room. The party of kids came in at that time. I told him to gather his things and get out. Then I pulled the girl aside and made sure she was okay. He wanted her to leave with him, but a couple of my employees stayed with her until he left. Thinking about that guy still gives me the creeps. Story 34. In the summer of 2007, I was working at a resort as a waiter. The hostess handed me a ticket for a table of 5 out on the deck. A mother, father, and 3 children. Perfect. Generally at this place, people were on vacation, in a good mood, and tipped very well. I first approached the table and noticed there was already a bottle of wine there, which was odd, because neither I nor my busboy had been there yet. I figured maybe they brought it from the bar. I was wrong. "Hi, my name is, not yet, Chef Marcus. Welcome to, name redacted. How may I help you this evening?" The wife said, "Can you bring us 2 wine glasses, please?" "Absolutely. I'll be right back." I went to the bar and asked the bartender, "Did they get a bottle of wine from you?" Bartender, "No, some dude came and gave it to her." Me, "Okay." On my second trip to the table, the wife was gone. Now, this gentleman was about 6'5", stacked, and looked like Mr. Clean, someone I would not want to upset. As I was clearly within earshot of the table, the son asked his father, "Daddy, why did mommy walk off with another man?" FML. "So, are you folks ready to order drinks for the kids, maybe some appetizers?" Mr. Clean replied, "Give us a few." Okay. I went to the kitchen and immediately informed my manager that something might be about to happen. Then I stepped out to smoke a cigarette and calm down for a few minutes. I went back to the table, and now Mr. Clean was gone. The mother was gone, and the 3 kids were sitting there by themselves. I took their drink order and returned to the bar. I said to the bartender, "Hey, those parents left the kids. It has been a bit. What do I do?" The bartender replied, "I am slow over here. I will go sit with them." She headed out to the deck. A moment later, my busboy told me, "Mr. Clean took a golf cart and is down by the lake crying." Okay, this was my only table, and I was getting worried. I smoked a few more cigarettes. After maybe half an hour, the mother finally came back to the table. I approached and said, "So, are you folks going to order this evening?" The mother answered, "Yes, yes, oh, yes." The kids were now weeping uncontrollably, saying their stomachs hurt and that they wanted to leave. I was stunned. I asked the mother, "Okay, ma'am, what will you be having?" She said, "Surf and turf." I asked, "How would you like your steak cooked?" She replied, "Medium rare." I asked, "What vegetable?" She said, "Summer medley." I asked, "Choice of starch, rice pilaf or oven-roasted potatoes?" She answered, "Rice." I said, "Okay. And for the kids, we have a great children's menu to choose from." The children, still crying, said, "Mommy, can we please go home? Our stomachs hurt," and continued sobbing. The mother said, "Oh, they all will have the surf and turf." So, for each weeping child, I had to ask all of the same questions while they sat there heartbroken, face to face with the person who had just destroyed their family. After getting the children's orders, I asked, "And will your husband be eating with us?" The mother answered, "Yes. He will take the chicken parm." Okay. I put the food order in and told my manager, "They are staying for dinner, but things could still get crazy. I do not know." Back in the kitchen, the cooks joked, "Give the children extra sharp knives." I loved those guys. When the food was ready, I delivered it. The husband was back by then. He looked like he had shrunk from a hulking 6'5" to a broken 5 feet. The poor guy. They proceeded to stay for 2 full hours, pretending nothing was wrong. Another couple even joined them at the table. My mind was blown. To those children, if you are reading this, I hope you do not associate me with the night your family fell apart. When they cashed out, the mother handed me $20 on top of what they had already tipped. Story 35. I was a waiter at an expensive but casual seafood restaurant. It was nearing closing time, and I was cleaning my section, waiting for my manager to check me out, when I heard a man speaking loudly to a woman a couple of sections over. It was an awkward group, a couple and a child, and you could tell something was wrong just by looking at them. The man looked like he was in his 40s, and the woman seemed to be in her late 20s or early 30s. The little girl was probably 6 or 7. It was clear the man was not the girl's father. They were different races, and he kept referring to her as your daughter. My section was already clean, but I could feel the tension radiating from their table, so I pretended to keep cleaning while I discreetly watched them. Then I heard the man speak directly to the little girl saying, "You need to shut the F up and sit down." He said it with such venom that it felt like a threat. He continued telling the mother what a bad parent she was and how badly she had raised her daughter. The woman sat very straight and stiff, facing her plate, barely looking up, nodding in agreement to everything he said. The little girl began to cry silently, and the man said to her, "I told you to shut the F up. I am feeding you and taking care of you, and this is how you repay me? By not eating your food, spilling your water, and making your mother cry." At that point, my blood was boiling. I am pretty low on the emotional affective scale, but this man made me feel like he needed to have his jaw broken. I never feel that way about people, and I am normally all for nonviolent resolutions, but he was no longer human in my book. For a few more minutes, he kept berating both of them, saying cruel and unhinged things. Finally, I could not stand it anymore. I walked over to my manager while he was setting someone up. As soon as I approached, he could tell something was wrong. Like I said, I am extremely even-tempered, but my blood was on fire. So he stopped what he was doing and asked me what was wrong. Before I ever spoke to my manager, the family server had already told him he should check out the table, but he had not made it over there yet. I said to him, "I'm about to punch that guy at table 53. He looked stunned, said a hurried "okay," and rushed over to the table. I'm not sure what he said, but a moment later they got up and left, with the man complaining that the little girl was walking too slowly. I had never heard someone sound so entitled, speaking with such insecurity that he needed absolute control over everything. It was pathetic. Story 36. I was working a private party for a group of 12 people. It was a 14-year-old's birthday. Only 4 teens, one man about 25, one woman about 25, and 2 middle-aged women showed up. They arrived in a limousine, and when the mother stepped out, I could tell she was a little off kilter. But it was a Saturday night, and it was her daughter's birthday. We got everyone settled at the table, and the adults ordered a round of drinks. The women split a bottle of wine, and the other 2 adults ordered Red Bull and vodka. I poured the first glass of wine for the mother, and she asked where the bathroom was. I told her, and she headed off. Everyone was relaxing and enjoying the atmosphere. I work at an outdoor sports entertainment complex. When we noticed the mother had been gone for a while, one of the other women went to check on her in the bathroom, and I started talking to the other adults at the table. Apparently, the 25-year-old man was a DJ the birthday girl liked, so the mother paid him $300 to come to the party, hang out for 3 hours, and enjoy free drinks. This seemed very odd to me considering the age difference. But whatever. You do you. The other 25-year-old woman was apparently a local makeup YouTube star who was also invited and paid to be there. So here we were, 45 minutes into the event, and the mother had been missing since minute 10. The other woman had been searching for her for roughly 15 minutes. I caught up with the other woman, and she told me she could not find the mother. Her phone was still in her purse on the table, but her wallet was gone. I began asking other women to help me check bathrooms and nearby areas trying to locate her. I asked the guys at the door if they had seen her, and they said, yeah, her shoes are right there by the door. Sure enough, her roughly $500 Prada heels were sitting by the front entrance. I relayed this to the other woman, and she let out a huge sigh. I assumed this had happened before. For context, this was around the 1-hour mark of a 2-hour event. The other woman left to search for the mother by asking the limo driver to make rounds around the complex. I kept the teens and other guests happy with food and drinks, but there was clearly a cloud hanging over the party. At the 1 hour and 30-minute mark, both women walked up the stairs and sat down as if nothing had happened. The mother slammed her glass of wine and started shoving candles into the cake they had brought, erratically. She pointed at the DJ and said very sternly, "Sing the frigging song." A very awkward rendition of Happy Birthday followed, and then the mother announced that they were leaving early. Everyone started getting uncomfortable, so I tried to catch her alone and asked, "Do you need anything?" She replied, "The check." I brought it to her, and she scoffed, saying to her daughter in front of her friends, "This is the biggest waste of money on you since Christmas." She paid in cash, told me to keep the change, and off they went. It was easily the most awkward party I will probably ever have to deal with. Story 37. Weirdest thing that happened to me while I was a waiter at Ponderosa Steakhouse. A family came in for dinner. It was a buffet, and we constantly had problems with people not paying for their meals, pretending they weren't eating, or sneaking bites off someone else's plate. So we were always on the lookout for that. Well, this mother hadn't paid and was caught eating off her daughter's plate. My manager sent me to either collect payment for her buffet or ask them to leave. I told her, "You need to pay for your meal." Holy crap, I wish I hadn't. She went bat crap screaming, "Are you friggin' kidding me? Screw you!" She threw money in my face, went to the buffet, and started taking full plates of the messiest items, smearing them all over the seats and table. After she had done this with about 10 plates, she started yelling at her maybe 3-year-old to do the same. The kid was crying loudly, saying, "No, mommy," while her mother used the child's hands to smear nacho cheese everywhere. The whole time, her husband just had his head bowed, looking like crap. Not again. This went on, plate after plate, for about 20 minutes, until we threatened to call the cops. Then they finally left. The husband came back about an hour later, apologizing, and handed me a $30 tip. So, yeah, that was insane. Cleaning up that mess was brutal. Story 38. I used to serve at a very touristy restaurant in a national park. We would get visitors from all over. One time, a 70-year-old Russian couple came in, and from the moment I started serving them until they left, I was so creeped out. They had thick accents but spoke fairly clear English. The man had a thick gray beard and was well over 250 pounds. They both had a harsh look about them. At one point, I overheard the woman say, "I think she would be good, but I'm not sure she'd taste as good as the last. She's thinner," the man replied. "Yes, but we could fatten her up." When I later approached the table with their bill, they handed me a $120 tip and asked, "Could we meet for lunch?" I had to explain, "I'm not allowed to meet with customers." The man said, "But honey, you'd be our customer." I almost died. I hid in the back for 2 hours folding napkins, and my coworker walked me home. I had no idea if they were offering me money for S or something even darker, like some sick cannibal scenario. No, thank you. I also got my boss to politely return the $120 to them. Story 39. It was a Friday night at my fairly small restaurant, 26 seats inside, and we had 75 covers reserved for the night. It was very busy. A lady walked up to the host stand and checked in for her 3-top reservation, saying her son and husband would be there shortly. 90 minutes and 3 glasses of wine later, her husband and son arrived. The husband looked, for lack of a better word, stoic. He said nothing to my hostess, walked straight to his wife's table, sat down, and started scrolling on his phone. I approached the table and I could cut the tension with a spoon. I swear you could practically smell how awkward it was. I took a drink order from the husband, which he gave me without looking up from his phone, and an order off the kids' menu for the son. I grabbed his drink, and as I was walking back to the table, he put his phone down, looked his wife square in the face, and said, "I want a divorce." No warning, no context. Out of the clear blue sky. "I want a divorce." I turned tail without even setting down his drink. It was so awkward I went into full panic and just left. The wife was bawling. The son just sat silently, and the husband went back to his phone. I had no idea what to do. Do I take their order? Are they going to order? I decided to give them a few minutes. It only took about 5 before the husband decided to leave. My supervisor, who had been following the situation just as closely as I had, told me to comp the 3 glasses of wine and the kids' food they had ordered before the chaos began. After that scene, the wife had bigger problems than the check. Story 40. Not a waiter, but one night as a busser, a group of bodybuilders took up a 6-top to have beers and hang out. One of them got blindingly drunk and was annoyed by a little girl complaining to her mother about not wanting her dinner. He wasn't sitting next to her exactly, but was the closest on the other side of a small rail separating the tables. He completely lost it and told the little girl in the booster seat to shut the F up, with her mother sitting right next to her. Imagine a tiny defenseless child getting screamed at by a hulking adult who could easily assault her. She started screaming and crying, and he bent right over into her face, veins popping, shouting the same thing over and over. The dad did nothing, but the mother, Mama Bear, stood up, got in between them, and laid into the man with fire in her eyes. His buddies had to hold him back and drag him outside. The police got involved, and things got ugly, though I was just cleaning tables by the time they left. Another one I remember, a 30-something daughter told her vindictive older mother that she would die and be forgotten by the whole family, then left because her mother refused to accept her boyfriend of another race. I'll never forget the mother's ugly, satisfied grin like she enjoyed seeing her daughter melt down. It's not my business, but stuff gets real in restaurants sometimes, especially when alcohol is involved. Story 41, I used to work at a rundown Mexican bar and restaurant downtown, the kind of place you only go to because someone else wants to check it out, and you begrudgingly come along. It was a lunch shift, around 2 o'clock. On a day like this, we only got a few tables. It was never busy. A woman walks in, late 20s or early 30s, asks for a table, and mentions a friend will be joining her. She seemed a bit vapid, breathy in her speech, and based on her questions about drinks, I guess she wasn't in the top half of her class. Her friend shows up. A very preppy millennial type in a suit, clearly thinks he's hot stuff. He wasn't outright rude to me, but there was arrogance in his voice. They kissed when they saw each other, so I assumed they were dating. I took their drink orders, and when I came back with them, the conversation between them was already heated. He was talking faster, and she looked petrified. I left them alone. Later, I walked by to check on them. He was standing next to the table, talking louder and faster, and she wasn't saying anything. I remember him saying something like, "This is why people talk crap about you behind your back." I went to the employee station and decided to hide there while they had their confrontation. Eventually, the guy walked right into the employee station, where customers aren't allowed, and demanded to pay the bill, saying he was done and leaving. I told him to step out of the station, then got the bill for him. He tipped decently and left. The girl stayed for another 2 hours, just drinking silently, and eventually left. She didn't tip. Story 42. I was 18 and working at a casual BBQ place when I got a large table at lunchtime of about 15 to 18 people. It seemed to be a big family. A couple of grandpas and grandmas, some aunts and uncles, a few teenagers, some kids, and a really nice woman and a man who I assumed was her husband, both in their early 40s. The husband ordered a double whiskey and Coke. Throughout lunch, he ordered 2 more double whiskeys with Cokes. His wife gave him looks and protested a bit when he ordered the last one, but he shut her down. The next time I walked by, the husband was sitting straight up, clenching the table, eyes wide in terror, staring straight ahead at nothing. His wife and one of the grandpas were both talking to him frantically, trying to calm him down. Eventually, the grandpa was able to escort him out. The wife looked like she was about to cry. I was socially awkward and unsure what to do, so after he left, I asked her, "Is everything okay? Is there anything I can do?" She was upset but still kind, and said, "We just want to leave now. Put everyone on one bill, and I'll take it." They had barely even gotten their food. I did as she asked and handed her the bill. A minute later, as I walked by on my way to the kitchen, I saw her looking really distressed and upset. The bill was almost $300. The double whiskeys with Cokes were $16 each because it was top shelf whiskey, and a lot of people had ordered appetizers. I asked, "Is everything okay?" She said, "Yes," and handed me her credit card. As soon as I brought it back, she thanked me, everyone rushed out, and she left me a $20 tip. I never found out what happened to the husband, but I felt horrible for him and his wife. For some reason, this experience stuck with me. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.